Hey, AfterBuzzers, we're talking the pilot episode of Living with Yourself. It leads to rebirth, which leads to bad gas and then being buried. Lots of stuff happens. Stay tuned.
I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz.
Forget about that beat that happens right before this drops. Hey guys, welcome to TV Pilot Reviews. I'm just going to say up top, we are a TV pilot review show. We are not an after show. We are only covering the pilot, so we're going to be spoiler free up top. We'll get into spoiling it later on, but I am Tara Erickson, your host, and I am joined by my lovely co-host. Go ahead and intro yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Mina Wahab and stoked to be here as usual.
Living with Yourself is what we are covering. So the pilot episode is entitled The Best You Can Be. I really liked it, but what were your overall thoughts, just to start off? Spoiler free.
Spoiler free, I liked it too, and it kind of reminded me like a little bit of Netflix's Maniac, but with a comedic twist to it. So definitely lighter, not as dramatic, but overall, yeah, I'm a sucker for Paul Rudd, so...
I love him.
I like him.
Oh, he's so good looking.
He's so cute.
Yeah, I loved that this brought in comedy, but with a really grounded script that I did actually really care about the characters right off the bat. Mm-hmm. And it got into like the nitty gritty fairly quickly, meaning if you have a short attention span, I feel like you could binge this show. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, I felt like it was bingeable because when it finished, I was like, oh, that's it? And then I like watched just like a teeny bit of the next one because I couldn't like help myself.
Exactly. It's a great show. I just want to get into the history of the show real quick for you guys. So this was directed by Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Ferris. So they have directed stuff like Little Miss Sunshine, but they actually started out making commercials. And they are actually the co-founder of Bob Industries, which is the leading commercial production company, which I think is awesome. And the show was created by Timothy Greenberg. He's won 2 Emmys for his work on The Daily Show. So if you're a fan of The Daily Show and that comedic voice, you'll probably really like this show. Or if you're a fan of anything that Dayton and Valerie have done. So now I want to get into a pass or play. Do you feel like you would pass on this show or play? Did it lead you wanting to binge it or not really?
I feel like when it's on, I'm watching it, but I'm not going to go out and seek it for myself, if that makes sense. Just because, you know, Paul Rudd was saying this in an interview on Conan. There was just like so much content out there, like how he's like said that he's never watched Game of Thrones and he knows it's a good show, but there's so much good content that if my time is limited, I'm not going to be watching this. But I think it's enjoyable, like if it's in the background or like you want to watch it here and there. I'm just like gonna pass for myself, but I recommend other people watching it.
Yeah, I am gonna play. I really wanted to click next, but because we are a TV pilot review show, I chose not to. I was like, I'm just gonna stay in this pilot mode, but I probably will go home and watch a few more episodes. It's a little bit binge worthy for me. All right, so let's get into the press, the cast, shall we?
Yeah,
I think Mina has it set up for who is in this show.
Yeah, so obviously we have our leading man, our man who actually used to be on Friends, if you remember, way back in the day, because that's when I first saw him and I was like, I like him. So Paul Rudd stars as Miles Elliott, and you know him from Ant-Man, I Love You Man, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. He's in a lot, and he tends to play like these comedic roles for the most part. Next up, we have Aisling B as Kate Elliott, who plays his wife. You may know her from This Way Up, Hard Sun, Bullet to the Heart, The Fall. And then following this, we have Desmond Borges, and he plays Dan on the show. You know, the very interesting Dan who gets Paul Rudd's character sucked into all of this. You may know Desmond from Private Life, You're the Worst, which is an FX show, and Mr. Popper's Penguins. Next up, we have Rob Yang as Young Soo. So he's been in a lot of good stuff. You know him from Succession, The Americans, and Bored to Death. Next up, we have his partner in crime, who is James Soule. He plays the character Young Ho, Yeah, no comment. You may know him from Insomnia, Raw Pieces, which is a Michael Takahashi work, and Helena's Flushing. We also have Joseph Bassett as Jerry. You may know him from Tower of the People, Reunion, and finally, New Dogs, Old Tricks. And last but not least, we have a very special person. We have Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And he plays himself in a really quick cameo, which I absolutely adored.
Me too.
Also, if you do like this show, there are a bunch of other shows that you may like as well. So if you like Maniac on Netflix, you're probably going to like this show. Like I said, Maniac is essentially the darker version of this show. Mm-hmm. Plot-wise, it's very similar. It's about like these two people and they go into this experiment and it's really odd and it revolves around like this idea of like dreams and reality, and it feels kind of like a little bit like this show, just like a little bit. There's some similarities there. Also, Stranger Than Fiction, which is a movie starring oh my gosh, Will Ferrell.
Yes.
It's very similar to this, kind of like this stream of consciousness, like, you know, he goes through his day and it's like this monotonous life where he does the same thing every day and he's kind of going through this midlife crisis, much like Paul Rudd's character. Office Space, you know, basically any show or movie where the protagonist is tired of the monotony of life. So like anything where you have that theme where it's like, what's going on? Like,
my everyday.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. Well, now we're going to get into the spoil section. So, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
If you haven't already watched the show, maybe don't watch anymore. But I want to get into, what was your favorite moment in this pilot episode? For me, I thought that the pilot started off really, really strong, where it started off in the middle of the action. There wasn't a lot of setup, which I just really enjoyed the cold open, that it was just in the middle of him breaking out from being buried alive, which I adored. And even when they did need to catch us up on his character and his life with his wife and stuff like that, they did it very quickly, but I still didn't think that it was too rushed. Mm-hmm. But I do think that my favorite moment in this episode was probably the cold open. I may change my mind in a minute, but I'm gonna go with cold open for now. What about you?
Oh, I definitely want to echo that sentiment, because that cold open, it made me think, what is this show even about? Like, I had no idea. It starts off with that and I'm like, is he having a dream? What the hell is going on? Like, this is so weird. And he's like in saran wrap and he's just breaking free. And I love how they tied it together, because I kept thinking, oh, they're probably gonna have this same image but like in the last scene of the last episode, but it ended up being, you know, in the penultimate scene of that very same episode, which I love how they tied it back, because it's like, okay, I'm gonna tease you with this scene and then we're gonna bring it back to how we got to this point right here, which means the rest of the story was being told in a flashback from that moment, which I absolutely loved. But I would also say that the parts that I loved when he's like going into the happy spa, and the you know, at the very end, like when he figures out he has a clone, spoiler alert obviously, they're like, okay, so like what's going on, like are you gonna like harvest our organs, or like they're making some sort of joke about like, oh no, like we would never like harvest your organs, that was just a joke. And he's like, oh okay, and he's like, but we weren't joking about the death and murder stuff. Right. So I just like the like darkness and the, you know, like the creepiness of it all, but how it's still very light and fluffy in a way. I like how they can like bring that balance of darkness and light.
Yeah, it didn't feel too dark in regards to, you're like, that's too real. It hits at home too hard. It's the dark comedy of it is still like, there's a lightness to it, a fluffiness.
Yeah,
I agree. So how do you feel if you saw Tom Brady coming out of basically anywhere? Would that make you want to go into said place? If you were having second thoughts and being like, I don't know if I should go to this party or go to this, I don't know, this place to get a pedicure, and you saw Tom Brady walk out, would it?
Oh my God, this is so bad. Like, I'm going to get so much heat for this online, but I would have no idea that that's even Tom Brady, because I do not pay attention to football. I'd be like, oh, cool, white guy walking out of a salon.
Yeah. All right. So it would not for her.
No.
For me, I would be like, if that's where Tom Brady just was, I need to go see what that's about. So that would definitely change it for me. How do you feel about Miles and his wife? Do you think that, because they set it up in the beginning that he's obviously having some issues. They don't dive too deep into it. I think he probably doesn't have really strong swimmers. They need to go get a fertility test.
Yeah.
If it's mainly focused on Miles and not his wife, I assume his wife has no issues. And he kind of feels like a weak swimmer as a character in the beginning of this pilot episode. There's a little of an underlying current there.
I love your puns. Like the current, the swimming, all these ties are just like fire.
Tying it together. Do you think that this is more a little bit prediction because we have not watched more than the pilot, but did you enjoy that relationship? I mean, did you get enough out of it in regards to the pilot? And do you think that that they might survive their relationship? Do you think Miles will still be married or maybe not?
I think the only reason that there's this potential for the relationship to survive is because now he has a clone. And what it seemed like from the beginning of the show is that the clone is like the better version of whatever you are. In this case, both of them survive. So there's, obviously like the negative aspects of the Paul Rudd character of Miles, and then there's like the positive aspects. And if they somehow like work together as a team, maybe this is something that could work with the wife, because obviously he's in a rut. It's focusing on the midlife crisis element of it. And I think them illustrating the relationship between Miles and the wife was really brilliant in that it just added to this like midlife crisis element in his life. Like, oh, I hate my job. Like, what am I doing here? Like, who am I trying to impress? What am I trying to sell? This is pointless. Oh, I go back home and I don't have the best relationship with my wife. Oh, like my mornings suck. Like, he just feels so frustrated. And I feel like that is illustrated so well in showing the dynamic between him at work with his colleagues and with his boss, and then also his relationship at home, because that's his entire life.
Yeah, I agree. He's an underdog at work. He's an underdog at home with his sperm specifically. He's an overall kind of underdog. But I feel like in his marriage with his clone, kind of like what Mina was saying, in regards to he'll have more time for his wife. I think his wife is going to lead to being happier, because I feel like he could go away and find time to find himself if he has a clone. Meaning It's sort of just like, you go take care of business for today, I'll be back tomorrow, which I would find rather interesting. Do you feel like you would trade, if you could be 100% you, would you choose to have a clone around all of the time for that?
If I could be 100% me, meaning like, what?
There's a quote in the show up top where Miles says to Dan, he says, "You're just so you. I don't know how you do it." Meaning it's kind of leading into that Miles is not 100% himself or doesn't know how to be, which leads him to handing him the card for the Top Happy Spa. I'm wondering if for you, if it was labeled that way of like, you can be 100% you, meaning you can accomplish 100% of the things that you want to accomplish, but you have to have a clone around you all of the time. Would you do it?
I think I would, because, okay, like this idea of like authenticity and being fully yourself, I think that's so important. It's actually something I've been thinking of this entire week. Like, oh, I am myself in all aspects of my life, but sometimes when I'm hosting, I'm putting on a different persona where I'm either like more poised or composed, and I'm not as crazy as I would be outside of work. Like, if I'm outside of work, I have a very dark sense of humor. I'm very sarcastic. I say like things that might be offensive, but I tone it down so much at work, and I'm more like, I would say like just like composed, and I would like to bring that level of authenticity I bring in my everyday life to like my work life. So in that sense, yes, but I think having a clone would just be like this annoying like reflection of me. Like, why is this person who looks just like me following me around? at the same time, I've always wanted a twin. So I don't know. I think I could deal with it.
Yeah, I feel like I could too, but also because I have a terrible memory, and there's a moment in this pilot which I really adored where Miles is getting along with his clone, getting to know each other by testing him on questions, and I don't remember a lot. So I would hope that my clone remembers stuff from, I don't know, childhood or last week or what I had for breakfast in case I go to the doctor. I'd be like, I don't know, ask my clone.
Fun fact, by the way, because I went to the science museum and I was like in a booth where I was learning specifically about clones. If you make a clone of yourself, that clone is not your age, but it starts at like the age 1. So the clone is actually younger than you. So it's very different from having a twin. It's literally like having a child. So
taking care of yourself as a
clone
baby
would be a child. Yeah.
It's worst.
So crazy. It's mind-blowing to think about it like that.
I feel like I would be like, I don't like you anymore, terrible twos. Why did I survive this long? That might be rough, taking care of yourself as a child, because, I mean, we have all been through our phases where we were brats,
Yeah.
I'm sure. Okay, so what would you rate this pilot episode then?
Okay, that's really hard.
When it's 0 through 5
0 through
stars.
5. I feel like
5 being the best, 0 being the worst.
It's definitely an above average show. I would probably give it like a 3.5, 3.7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm going to give it a 4. I do think that by knowing that it was directed by Dayton and Ferris, everything that I've seen that they've made, I've really enjoyed, and I thought was done in a really cool and interesting way, and it never failed in the writing aspect. So I'm going to give it a 4, and I think it might bump up to a 5. I feel like it might be one of those shows that gets better as it goes. And I mean, Paul Rudd is just so handsome. I can't stand it. Okay, so let's get into then predictions. We don't normally do predictions on TV pilot reviews, but I thought, heck, why not? What do you think?
AfterBuzz
Hey,
TV
yeah. What do you think is going to happen in this show? I mean, we start off with just the foundation of, hey, they messed up. You got the bad gas, and we need to fix the problem, or you're going to be stuck with this clone. Where do you think they're going to go from here?
So here's my theory. I have a couple theories, but number one, if the show is called Living with Yourself, usually that title is used in a very like sinister way, like, oh, how can you live with yourself after doing this, or oh, you've got to live with yourself. It's like something you say when someone gets murdered, like, how could you live with yourself? So I wonder if like one of them is going to be killed off because only one can survive, because they say at the end of episode 1, he basically says, there's 2 of us, and like I have my own life, and I have a wife, and I have a job, like no, like this can't happen. There's 2 of us, there can only be one. So either one of them is gonna get killed off, and the new person will replace the old, or the old will replace the new, who knows, but that $50,000 is gone. Now I guess $45,000 because they get the 10% discount, which is great. So I guess, or here's the thing, or it's like, okay, well, now we have this problem, maybe it's a benefit, you got to live with yourself now, and this clone is a part of you and goes everywhere you go, and maybe you're gonna have like an open marriage where it's like the 2 of them and the wife, and maybe the new clone will get the wife pregnant, who knows.
Maybe the new clone has better swimmers. I'm curious, do you think the new clone would also run into the credenza? Because Miles has a problem. He runs into the credenza. I've never even heard the word credenza before. I don't know what that is, but I saw it on the show. It's a shelf, and it's in the wrong place, and Miles runs into it all of the time. Starts off the episode where she's like, is that the credenza again?
Yeah, I was like, what is that? I heard her say that. I'm like, credenza?
Yeah, it's the table that he continues to run into, and I'm wondering if his clone is going to run into the credenza as well. That might be a fun ongoing game. Yeah, I'm not sure about my prediction. I feel like maybe with their referral fee, it's bumped up to like 25% off. So maybe by the end of this show, they might be referring people, and there might be clones running around everywhere, and everyone's a lot happier. It might turn into like some, I don't know, weird show where there's clones, and wives and husbands are happier because no one's as tired anymore.
So Westerworld, basically.
Basically, 100%.
Except on Netflix.
Except on that. So what do you think, I want to ask you, what do you think people will relate to the most while watching this pilot?
You know, I think that feeling of being stuck no matter where you are and like, okay, I'm doing the same routine over and over again. We talked about this with that Amazon Prime show, which the name is slipping me.
Undone?
Undone.
Yes.
Yes. That I think that's a very relatable feeling for everyone. Like whether you're having a quarter life crisis, a midlife crisis, you're going through a divorce, your world is unraveling. I think that aspect is very relatable. And I think Paul Rudd in general is a very relatable actor where all the characters he plays, he's just, first of all, he's super lovable and likable and adorable. And second of all, like, you can just relate to his character. Like, he always has this feeling of like, ugh, like, my life, like, what am I doing? But then you want to follow him on his journey because you're like, well, is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? So I think that aspect of the show is what's going to be relatable. But I think it's the comedy that's going to keep the people. It's the, oh, what's going to happen with the clones? Oh, this is a weird fantasy element just being interspersed into this comedy realm. And that's what's going to keep people staying, is the fantasy and the comedy of it all.
I agree. And I feel like the comedic parts of this pilot mostly came from the people who own Top Happy Spa. Paul Rudd was also, he's always funny, but there was a lot of comedic lines and a lot of punchlines thrown to the owners of that. So I'll be happy to see more of them as the show goes on, because I thought they were hilarious. But I do feel like this show is mixed with the real life emotion, and everybody, I think, maybe toys with the idea of like, if I had a chance to get out of here, would I take it just to escape for a little bit? And I feel like this show does a really good job of toying with that idea in an unusual way by having a clone, which I thoroughly enjoy. Cool. Do you have any final thoughts on this episode or anything you want to tell the people about this Paul Rudd show, Living with Yourself on Netflix?
I just feel like, even if you like The Parent Trap, you guys, that was my favorite movie growing up, is The Parent Trap starring Lindsay Lohan. Even if you like that, I feel like this show will make for some great antics. It's like light and fun, and you can't like not like a show with Paul Rudd in it, you know? I know there's a lot of content out there, and I know I said that I wouldn't like binge watch all of this, but I probably will still see a little bit of episode 2 and like try to see like what's happening with this or read spoilers, because I still really want to know. I just think that there's like something nice about this show that's refreshing. And it's on Netflix. It's bingeable. Like, why not?
100%. I think this show is 100% bingeable. I think if you like anything that Paul Rudd has been in, you'll like this show. Paul Rudd takes up 90% of the screen time, so you will never be without him if you're watching Living with Yourself, which is cool in my opinion, because like I said, again, he's super, super good looking. Great. Those are my final thoughts. I'd say play it all day. It's an enjoyable show for the rest of your weekend. That's it for us over here. I've been your host, Tara, but tell the people where they can find you, Mina.
You all can find me on Instagram, on Twitter, everywhere at Mina Makes Magic.
Awesome, and I'm Tara Erickson. You guys can find me all over the internet, TaraErickson, especially on YouTube and IMDb. This has been your TV pilot review of Living with Yourself, the pilot episode. Don't forget to rate, review, leave a bunch of comments, give us 5 stars on iTunes, keep coming back so we can keep doing the show. If you really love Living with Yourself, let us know, and we'll do an after show for you guys. We're here for you. We love you guys, and we will see you on the next one. Bye.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.